Okay, let's kick it off. So my name's John. Welcome everybody. I'm the head of sales here at HumanFirst. I am joined by my two wonderful presenters, Stephen Broadhurst and Ali Douvre. Ali is a product manager in Google Cloud's conversational AI team. In her current role, she's product manager for Dialogflow CX in the contact center AI solution. Prior to that, she worked in conversational AI for 4 years, collaborating directly with customers to implement conversational AI solutions that drive positive self-service experiences. Before joining Google, Ali worked in data and analytics at JP Morgan. I'm also joined today by Stephen Broadhurst. He's our VP of Customer Solutions at HumanFirst. Stephen's led the development of conversational AI for some of the world's best companies, and now he helps our customers with all their NLU, LLM, and AI needs. Welcome, Ali and Stephen.
Good to be here, John.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so our agenda for the day, we're going to spend a couple of minutes just setting the stage on our problem and why Dialogflow ES to CX. We'll do a demonstration on how to do that with HumanFirst and Dialogflow, and we'll spend some time on the future of generative features, and we'll save some time for Q&A at the end. Before I hand it over, I just want to give a quick overview of the problem and some of the customer experience conversation design teams are facing. If we rewind in time a little bit, chatbots came with a lot of promises. You know, there was an opportunity to reduce effort on the customer end and to reduce costs for a lot of businesses. But getting there was pretty hard sometimes. It took a lot of time to build a chatbot on, really powerful platforms like Dialogflow. And we've helped a lot of those teams optimize these deployments using real conversation data instead of best guesses. And, about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, generative AI has really changed the game. There's a lot more value on the table. There's lower effort customer journeys. It's easier developer experiences. Capturing that value for a lot of teams means switching platforms, though. So like a Dialogflow ES to CX. And we're seeing teams capture a 5 to 10 plus improvement in their F1 scores, which is a primary metric for showing the accuracy of your deployment just by making the switch. So that's like a really powerful and high impact opportunity for you. But as customer expectations are rising, making the switch is not really whether or not you should do it, but when you should do it. And if your design team has just put a lot of time to the project, you can imagine that the pains of change can, linger a little bit. So a lot of people want to know, will it be a lot of work to make the switch? Will the CX model be more accurate, and how will I know? How can I work with generative AI safely, and how can I monitor to know if it's operating correctly? This is going to be the core of the presentation here that Stephen and Ali are going to tackle. They're going to cover this and more. And with that, I'd like to pass it over to Ali.
Thank you. So I'm Ali, as John mentioned, and I'm the product manager for Dialogflow at Google. And so I'll briefly describe the Dialogflow CX platform and some of the features that we're really excited about. So just quickly, initially, so Dialogflow CX, we launched in around 2020, and it was the next generation of Dialogflow products after Dialogflow ES. And CX was really built to provide an enterprise-grade compliant platform for large enterprises to build complex virtual agents for chat, voice, multi-channel, et cetera. And so what this means in practice is that we've really built the platform optimizing for a couple of different areas. One is, as I mentioned, large scale. So it includes end-to-end developer tools. We've also built it for compliance and the latest, and to meet the latest AI regulations. So this is where we're investing a significant amount of time in terms of data residency, key management, redaction controls. And this is where we will continue to invest a lot of our time when it comes to security, compliance, and regulations. Moreover, although ES and CX have very similar first and third party integrations, Dialogflow CX is where we're expanding the amount of integrations that we have. So in addition to first party integrations like Google Chat and third party ones like Meta and Audio Codes, Avaya, et cetera, we also have integrations with our own CCaaS platform, Contact Center AI platform, CCAIP. And so this is an out-of-the-box, end-to-end solution that can really help accelerate time to value and time to launch. And then we've also made available a multi-channel, multimodal integration called Call Companion, which allows end users who are calling in to a contact center to also receive a text message on their phone with an embedded hyperlink where they can follow along the conversation through text as well. So this provides some really great accessibility, flexibility for end users who might be in a loud environment or who prefer to perhaps write sensitive information over chat over instead of voice. So those are all advantages that you will find in Dialogflow CX, and this is really where our focus is and where new features will continue to be built on. And the last point I'll mention here is that Dialogflow CX is really where we think the future of building new agents should be built on. So we have a visual flow builder here, as you can see on the screen. And so this allows you to follow along where you're building and how each state within a conversation is connected to either a prior state or a future state. You also have clear and explicit conversational control, so you can deterministically spell out what a virtual agent will respond with and how those conditions are architected. And all of that ultimately renders a better end user experience and provides businesses with just a lot more control over that experience for their end users. So let's move on to the next slide around why it is really important and a great time now to switch to Dialogflow CX. So as I think was mentioned before, more and more businesses are becoming conversational. End users want to have a more conversational experience. We're seeing this really across the board, across all ages too. And companies are trying to innovate faster as well. And so what this means is that we need to make sure that the latest advances in AI are available and available in such a way that actually help you accelerate the ability to create and maintain virtual agents. And so Dialogflow CX is where we are investing all of our time in the integration of our newest generative AI models. So this is where you have access to the latest foundational models that Gemini is putting out. So you have Gemini 1.0 Pro, 1.5, 1.5 Flash. These are available directly through Dialogflow CX through 4 different generative AI features that we'll touch on a little bit later. So all of this will help you drastically decrease the time to value and decrease the time it takes you to build and launch virtual agents. So with that, let me transition over to Stephen, who can demonstrate kind of how this works in Dialogflow CX.
Hey. All right, let me share my screen. So this is Dialogflow ES. And why are we starting here? Well, last update to ES was June 2022, and none of the new generative features are there. And a lot of people are still on ES. So maybe it's because your virtual call center provider, it's like pre-integrated there. Maybe they charge more for the license to have a CX connector, but we see a lot of people there. And I think really now with the generative features coming, people's expectation in their ordinary lives is changing. And there are things you can achieve now with those features you just simply can't in ES. And we're going to try and show one of those 4 ways generative comes to CX after doing a migration out of ES through HumanFirst, doing some cleanup, getting to CX, and in a controlled way, deciding where we do or don't want to use those new generative ways and checking they're safe. So this is ES. we have lots and lots of intents. This is a fictional fashion retailer, sells jeans and boots and shirts and designer items, has an IVR, has a chatbot, has been building in Dialogflow for a long time. They have like around 100 intents in here, and you can see that they've tried to follow good practice, giving it a naming standard so they can kind of find out where they're going, kind of search for things here. But you've kind of got the functionality all modeled as intents with follow-ups, and it's actually very hard to work out what's going on. And that's one of the major reasons people have stopped, is that they've built something that just about works, and then there needs to be that goal the other side of the journey to get them to make the move. So this is HumanFirst. HumanFirst is the best place to do your intent and entity design, and also your new generative prompt design. And we integrate with a wide variety of systems. You can just click and add almost all of the major platforms here, and where there is one listed here, we've probably integrated with it in the past. And we're going to be concentrating on the Google suite of ES and CX and Gemini via Vertex here. And so to bring a workspace in, I'm just going to create a new one. Generally, you have one workspace per model or bot or IVR that you're working with. And we're going to create something completely blank, and we're just going to bring it straight in from ES. So we use the connector. It'll connect in, find all the agents there. That's the one I was showing you that we want. We're going to understand that hierarchy and bring it in and actually use it to show you in a much more organized way how the intents are related, and then you can decide how you move forward with CX. And we're just going to bring that in there. I'm just going to clear everything. I'm not going to review the changes at this time. We've got a full interactive sync experience, bidirectional. I'll show a little bit of that with CX later on, but right now we just want to bring everything in. And so immediately we've got all our intents, all our entities, system entities, custom entities, and we can say, right, okay, we know what's going on there. Let's immediately evaluate the quality of that model. So very fast, we can just run a K-fold evaluation. K-fold's pretty standard, but it's a great way of understanding the accuracy of your bot, understanding where intents are really confused, and really part of the HumanFirst platform is help you understand the good bits, the bad bits, and not transferring the bad bits to CX and improving the good bits without losing anything. This will take a moment to run. It's just finished. We're also going to add in then, we've got our model. Let's add some conversational data. And the HumanFirst paradigm is to look at your data through the lens of your model or your prompt at any one time, so that you make sure you understand the customer impact of what's happening. So we can take data from BigQuery or the bot history or pretty much any data you like. And we've got around 5,000 conversations for this customer in a month. It's about 100,000 utterances, roughly half client, half expert. And when we bring them in, we're going to embed them so that we can cluster them, we can search them, we can find where similar, we can find any point in the model there. So looking at the results of the test, we can immediately see like which are the worst intents, which are the best intents. And right there, all those follow-ups, we have all these repeated yeses and nos and cancels. And follow-ups tend to be a really big part of the ES problem. And then we start getting into some real things which definitely don't look as good as they should be. And we can click through to those. And in HumanFirst, we understand like where and how it's used in Dialogflow. So we can see that this is a top level intent, but then if we look at maybe stating info, some addresses, we can see that this is top level, but then it's got its follow-ups here. And if we zoom in on, say, cancel and those overlaps, we can immediately see that people have created cancel in a ton of different places. And people have probably not done it with the same standard. So on this give name one, it has quite a lot of training. On this state price one, it doesn't. So we need to consolidate and clear those up. And we can just take these and then just merge through those intents and tidy them up. For the conversations are imported now, and we can run training. And now we're taking the model and we're evaluating every single conversation within that 5,000 against it. So what do conversations look like? We can see every utterance and then exactly within the utterance, like where it was in the conversation. And just letting this run through. What that's going to let us then do is say, well, we know then exactly how much of our model we're covering. So we've got 50% of that month's conversations covered at 70%. Maybe you're using a different confidence level in your bot. You can drag that and work that out. But we're immediately knowing the impact of our customers of what's happening. To go to CX then. Everything we're running there was on the HumanFirst NLU. That's very representative CX, but you can also add and power everything off the actual CX NLU, just adding it there. The evals, because it's remote, take a little bit long to run, so I won't do it in a demo there, but we've run an advanced versus standard. And going from ES, you immediately get access to that much better NLU, standard advanced, even some custom NLUs if you really need it. And depending on your model size, it might make a big difference or it might make a very small difference. So on this one, you can see that standard advanced, almost identical. We've only got 70 intents after we've cleaned them up, about 1,000 or 2,000 training utterances. Some of our clients have 1,000 with almost 100,000 training utterances. And there it can start to make a really big difference. So you can make an informed decision about which you use. To get it to CLU, we're just going to export it out to integration. We're going to skip the empty parents. We're going to select CLU. We're just going to create a new agent for this. Again, we're going to flatten that hierarchy down so that the naming standard's maintained in CLU, and we're not going to filter there, and we're going to export it. So this is going to take just a little moment to run through. And I'll flip across to Dialogflow CX. And let's look at all our agents. I'm just going to refresh that. Okay, and we've got our new ES2 there created. So here we've got all our intents. We've got all our entities. And also, if we pick one that's got annotations, they've all come through and they're ready to use. And we've immediately got access then to that visual flow designer. And when the customer comes in, we can then say, okay, we want to create a route. We want to control where that goes. So we can say for any of the intents, do we want to use generative? Do we want to use a fixed answer? We've got that immediate ES training to decide what we're going to do. So say we've got a color question. We could say, let's just create a page, create a new page, and we're going to create that page for whatever our answer is for, what do I select? I select color question. And save that. And we're getting this very visual flow layout. I'm just going to switch to one where I've done a few, and let's go through the main pick of that one there. One of the really nice things about CX is you can, really clearly see that we've got greetings, we've got managing and confirm addresses, and then where we've got reusable bits of conversation throw, we're able to create a module which is reusable and split them into flows. So we don't have that problem with things being recreated in ES over and over again. And ES is the place where you get those generative features. So for any one of these, and we're calling them intents now, but really they're problem classes your bot solves for. And you can decide to perhaps have a knowledge base and create an agentic retrieval augmented generation, like a RAG bot, pulling out answers and answering. You can have generative fallbacks or generative extractors or generative getbacks on tracks there, and actually, access Gemini really, really easy and natively. And I'm just going to solve how that lets you, even beyond the more advanced NLU, solve problems which you couldn't before in ES and CX. So there are lots of other improvements about building. It really lets you up the professionalism of your delivery. I really like it. So for instance, one of the things is you can actually capture test scripts here, save them, and then rerun them. Really makes a difference to checking that you've got that whole migration process down, everything's working right. Let's just say something like, I want to change the address on my order. And here we go, we're going to start using that reusable module. And as people start to make changes and do builds here, that's where the fully interactive sync comes in. So let me pause this conversation one moment. And if we want to bring that back into HumanFirst, I'm just going to run the same import and show that bidirectional sync. So create a new CX workspace. And we're going to import. And again, just take that CX. That's the one I was in there. Give it the hierarchy. Again, I'm going to start by just establishing the sync by just bringing everything in over the top, just having that first workspace for CX. And just like we did with understanding the ES context of the intents or the classes of problems, we understand here the CX context. So if we're looking at one of these that we're using, so for instance, managing shipping details, we know it's used in default start flow there. And when we haven't configured yet, we know it's an orphan, we know it hasn't been used yet. And as people continue their work, say they find they need to edit something in here, let's take that embroidery one we did before, and say I want to get some stitching on the back of my jacket. I'm going to save the auto annotation there, hit save, and we can bring that back in fully interactively and see exactly what's changed in both directions. So maybe you've got a split NLU team, copywriting team, maybe you've got knowledge managers managing your RAG, your FAQ articles. Let's just bring that back here and review changes. I'm just going to review everything. We run through the Dialogflow objects in the hierarchy you need. Obviously, you can't have annotations without intents. So we'll come through, check down that tree. We'll find there's only actually one change, and it's just that one phrase which I changed there. And we can apply that and know they're perfectly in sync. What the latest status of the build as we go through that migration. Okay, rounding out onto generative. So we're midway through this conversation. We've got this point, and this conversation, we're probably replicating what we used to do initially in ES. Maybe this is an IBR, maybe we've got a triage flow and we need to capture an address here. And we had a client who was really struggling to get as many conversations as they wanted fully automatically, so the bot handled them itself without having to hand off through. So say I type a address in here. Say there. Okay, an American address. Okay, so we're capturing out the house number. It's also capturing out the zip code, but let's zoom in on the house number here. So that's great, and we can pass it onto our API and validate it. But one of the things is perhaps the speech to text isn't perfect. Perhaps actually someone lives at flat B, and we can see there that it's not getting it. Or perhaps the speech to text actually does it as ordinals. So perhaps we're getting 6,064 as words, and we're getting 64. And that's nothing that the client in this case configured wrong. It's just that when you've got the intent here, which we're using, we've imported the system entities, but we can see that the way that likes annotators, it's focusing in on this, and it's not reading that and you can alter the annotation here, but you'll find ordinals are much harder, And with this previous generation of technology across all the platforms, it was really, really challenging to get that level of capture right at really high accuracy levels. The new version of technology with LLMs really lets us make huge strides in this. So if we flip back to our build, we can say, okay, let's work out how we use some generative to solve that. So if we go to collect address, we've got our roots. They're pretty simple. Did we capture it with the existing entities? Did we not? And we can create a new one here. And we're going to control it again. We're only going to decide to use it in exactly this situation. So we can have a controlled migration where we feel it's appropriate to generative. And we're going to say, let's have a generator. And when you add a generator, you've got a choice of creating a new one. And we've got access to all those models that Ali talked about. And we need to say, let's call it something like detect ordinal. And then we need to create a prompt for it. And something we see that like this generative world isn't going to be magic, right? Like in this prompt, we need to describe everything that this generative function is going to be able to do. Well, how are we going to build that? How are we going to understand, does it work? How are we going to know the situations we need to test it against? And again, just like HumanFirst was the best place to do your intent and entity design and track your progress there, we feel it's also the best place to do your new generative and prompt design. So if I flip back across, we've already got all the data here. We've got those conversations. We've got our existing model. And we can slice through that. So we can find exactly this intent, just the same that's in CX. And we can slice through all the conversations and find every conversation where someone gave our address. Lots and lots of places like that. And we can see exactly where that happened in the conversation and exactly what happened after it. So let's see then, we've got this case. We want to develop a prompt for it. We know these ones pretty much work already. Let's come down through and let's see if we can find, like, does that transcription error really happen? Well, okay, we've got a 60 there. Let's take that one. We've got a 1 there. Let's take that one. And we can move to the stash, which is a temporarily working place to gather things ready to run a prompt on. And then we can slice through again, 5,000 conversations at a moment. Okay, actually, there are lots of things that are similar to that data. And let's build up a good example. That 900 looks hard there. Build up a set to, develop your prompt on. Your prompting, it tends to be a very iterative example, and you really need to examine these edge cases and build up a test set that lets you evaluate, like you used to do with F1, the quality of that prompt. We can also add manually here any that we want. So perhaps I'm going to say something hard like, I live at 36B, Kensington Gardens, London. Perhaps we try and trick it. Like sometimes you don't have a house number. So what if you say something like, I live at Highgrove House. We can start our prompt development. We've got access to all the same models that were there in Gemini. I've just picked 1.5 Flash. We can set everything the same. And then we can say, let's set the scene briefly, where we think there's something in here, we'd like you to extract it. And we can run it for every single one of these using this replacement. And we just want the number. What HumanFirst will do, we'll say, like, rather you cutting and pasting back out into a Playground or Vertex Studio, we're going to parallelize all those calls. It's already run through the 10. And then we're going to index, embed, calculate all that data science on the result. So when you need to find something in your result, or you need to cluster it, or you need to compare it to your desired result, you've got that data science pre-done for you. And we can see exactly what I was saying, that this is doing great. So for that one with 900, we can inspect the original result. We can see where it happened in the conversation. And it's actually getting the right number there. Fantastic. But we haven't written our prompt well enough to actually capture 36B. And we probably want this like as an integer to throw off, or a short string to throw off our API. And the LM's tried to help, but here for Highgrove, like, it's coming back with an unreliable answer. So I'm not going to dive into kind of like doing prompt engineering. We run courses on how to do this and how to make sure that they're really trustworthy. But we can improve that prompt. Here's what I did. And so we're saying, okay, there are different types of numbers, and we're also always giving it an out. And when we've run this one, then we can see that when it comes through and it faces those, it's going to capture the 36B. And because we're giving it an out when there isn't one, we're going to get a really reliable 0 in order to be able to pass it onto the API still. And yeah, we haven't been able to capture that number, but if that's where your system works, we've at least improved the number going through, and we'll be able to build the business case to say we're going to capture this many more things, starting to utilize some of this technology. Having finished, that can go straight into your prompts in Dialogflow here. There's a pre-built parameter which they provide. So we're just going to run that on what's there, save it. So we're launching, based on the same situation, our generator. We just need to give its outputs a name. I use the same one as the name of the generator. And then we're free to use that however we want. We don't have to use it back to the customer, but I'm just going to put it, you live at that same value. Hit save. Look at our routes. And again, for each of these areas that the bot is controlling, you've got that decision about what sort of hybrid bot you want as you go through your journey and start to use more and more generative. So we could rely on the existing one and fall back to generative, or we could put it at the top and say, you know, for this situation, let's use it. If I just run that again, we're getting Gemini stepping in, we're getting exactly that right answer. And that's just because the LLMs, the scale of training and the amount of natural language it's seen is just that much more huge. Its ability to extract in complexly phrased situations is much better. And indeed, it can do it across the whole conversation. So I'm passing one utterance here, but you could pass the whole conversation and say, try and work out exactly what the address is. So suddenly you've just got access to all this more power, and you can take advantage of it in a really controlled way, really quickly bringing your bot from ES, keeping your existing systems going, and starting to address some of those key business metrics. And with that, I'll hand back to Ali and John to perhaps find out what some of those other things you could do are.
Sounds good. Thanks, Stephen. So there are a couple of other generative features that I want to touch on within Dialogflow CX. But first and foremost, I want to touch on the vision for Dialogflow CX as it relates to the intermingling of what I call deterministic flows and generative features. So when I say deterministic flows, I am referencing the state-based pages that comprise a flow that Stephen illustrated a couple minutes ago. And so the advantage of these deterministic flows are that the builder of the virtual agent has control over what the agent says, how they say it, and the type of conditional steps and logic to get from point A to point B. So that is how Dialogflow CX was originally built, and provides builders with a lot of flexibility as it relates to how they want to architect a conversation. But as we move forward and look forward to generative features, LLMs were not originally created with the design consideration of having explicit control over how the model responds and in what way. And so the advantage of mixing these two kind of design choices in one in Dialogflow CX is that you have the control that you need, but then you also have the ability to accelerate development when maybe you don't need that level of explicit control. And so this is what we call hybrid agents in Dialogflow CX. So this means that you can build an end-to-end conversational agent whereby an end user perhaps starts with a flow, then moves to a generative feature, and then moves back to a flow depending on what the business rules are and the level of control that you need at any point in time in that conversational experience. So hybrid agents is really the future of agent building. It's really about mixing these two different design ideas into one experience. The second feature that I want to touch on are generators. So Stephen touched on this, and we've seen a lot of success and usage with generators. And a couple of popular use cases for generators are, one, summarizing a conversation up to a particular point. This is useful when the end user and customer simply ask for a brief summary of what has been discussed up to that point. But it's also helpful when transferring the end user to, say, a live agent or a different department. Those summaries can be used by the agents to get up to speed really quickly and then ensure that the conversation they're having moving forward with the user is personalized, and the user doesn't have to repeat themselves multiple times. So that's a big advantage of generators. And then we've also seen a lot of usage around data transformation, also doing arithmetic to help with calculating different pieces that are needed within a conversational experience. So that's a bit on generators. And then last but certainly not least is Playbooks. So Playbooks has seen a couple of different nomenclature changes over the past year or so. It was originally called generative agents, generative playbooks. We also just call it Playbooks. And what this is a natural language. You essentially just use natural language English instructions to prompt the LLM to guide the user from point A to point B. So instead of building out pages, conditions, intents to guide the user through a series of steps, you're simply just telling the LLM how the model should greet the user, what sorts of questions or validation steps might be needed. You can link to different types of tools that you already have. And this is really the future of creating virtual agents using LLMs. And so this feature is in private GA, which means that we can simply allow list you to use it. We're looking to move to public GA in the next couple of months. So for any users who want to use this, either reaching out to Stephen, myself, or filling out a support case, and then we can easily get you allow listed for that. And we've seen a lot of success using generative playbooks in a number of different arenas. One is troubleshooting. So think of a router issue, or maybe you can't get into your account. These can be complex problems with a lot of root causes. And it's not always clear what the underlying root cause is. And so architecting this in a CX flow could be very complex and also quite time consuming. But simply providing instructions to the LLM as to how to try to debug this and then letting the LLM reason on its own is a really efficient way to build out these troubleshooting flows. Another area is food ordering. So again, food ordering can be really complex in terms of the combinations of items that a user might want to order. And so this is an easy way of doing so. And then last is what I call steering. So at that initial layer at the top of a conversation where you say, "Hi, welcome to Google. How can I help you?" And the user can utter, a million different utterances, and you allow the LLM to reason and understand what the user wants to say, and then guide the user to either a CX flow, maybe a CX flow that then routes to a generator, a data store, or your RAG solution in CX. So that steering being done in generative playbooks is also really helpful and an easy way to get started. With that, I will turn it over to John.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ali. Thank you, Stephen, for a great presentation from you both. Really informative. We've got a couple of questions that have come through. So one person would like to know, like, how long would it take for a project to migrate? Like, what kind of expectations should you maybe set with your organization if you want to go from ES to CX?
Yeah, so I think it depends like just how big your bot is to start with. If you're up in the 500 intents kind of category, 100,000, like you're going to want to do probably quite a lot of work to bring down to what's really necessary, so you don't pull all that complexity with you. So I'd say probably 3 months. If you're down at, like, for example, we showed, I think you can probably do it in 2 sprints if you just want to carry across the same functionality for ES. And you're then in so much of, sorry, two-week sprints, so like around a month. You're in that much better to take advantage of these capabilities. What I tend to find is people want to, and they've immediately got things they really want to fix, so they tend to build in like doing extra things on top. But those are some rough numbers. And if someone's got like a particular case they want us to try and help estimate for, we can try and help do that.
Awesome. Thanks, Stephen. There's another question here around bringing your knowledge base into CX data stores, kind of difficulty around this. I think either Ali or Stephen, if you maybe just share your perspective on that or some information around bringing in the knowledge base.
Yeah, so Google provides a really good answer to basically throw it at a website and get a knowledge base articles. But so do a lot of the other providers, and the result you get there tends to be quite dirty, have a lot of dirty data that's your copyright registrations for your website, etc. And more importantly, you don't kind of know what it's actually brought in. You have to go through and inspect it. And the biggest factor on a RAG bot quality is the quality of that knowledge that's going in. Rubbish in, rubbish out. So one of the workflows that we really love in HumanFirst is the ability to go through and process one of those just generated data sets, create really nice answer units, and then actually bring that in a clean way into Dialogflow, into that knowledge base. And when you've got it there, you can then look at those conversations coming through and say, what are my gaps? And we can show you a gap analysis on FAQ and say the questions which are not getting answered and you need a knowledge article of roughly this set, work here. So that's the process I'd say, is that like do your initial ingestion and really clean it, be able to monitor it somehow, have a way of managing that in a CMS system or a KMS system, and then bring that in a controlled way into Dialogflow, and you'll get so much of a better result. And that applies for any RAG solution, I think.
And maybe I'll just add two additional things here. So we support a couple of different formats when it comes to what sort of data we can ingest. So we support different website URLs, BigQuery, and then anything that's in GCS. We have a long list of additional integrations that we're working towards to be able to support additional data types and just one-click integrations with both first-party and third-party knowledge systems. So look out for more in the next couple of quarters. We'll continuously be iterating on what we support there. And then the second is when it comes to quality, on our website, we have a self-serve evaluation tool that you can use to understand how well your RAG solution is performing, with some suggestions around how to optimize that as well. So I definitely recommend taking a look at that to iterate on the performance of your RAG solution.
Awesome. Thank you both. Just for everyone, all the attendees, we are at time, but our speakers have agreed to stick on a little bit longer to answer some more questions. There's a couple more in the chat, so thank you for that. Ali, you mentioned voice. One question here is asking if you can speak a little bit more about support and voice channels and how that might impact migrations as well.
Yeah. So we offer pretty similar voice channels in Dialogflow CX as we do in Dialogflow ES. So We have one-click integrations with Avaya, Audio Codes, Twilio, and Vox Implant. The additional integrations that we have in Dialogflow CX are our first-party phone gateway, which allows you native support with Call Companion, which is that multimodal option, and then also with our CCaaS offering, CCAIP. So those are our two additional integration points for Dialogflow CX. And then in CX, once you have migrated your agent to CX, you have additional controls over different IVR settings. So DTMF, origin, end of speech sensitivity, configuring your endpointing, and all that can be managed either at the agent level or at the page level too. So you have very finite level of granularity in terms of how you want to control that.
Awesome, thanks for that. I think the last question here was someone was asking about what kind of insights or analytics would a person get in their conversations on CX that maybe don't exist on ES?
Yeah. So in Dialogflow CX, we have you have control over what gets logged. So you can enable your logs to appear in cloud logging, and then also conversation history logs. So these two types of settings determine what sort of analytics you have access to. But then, of course, there are certain scenarios where you might not want to log certain actions and conversations for security reasons. But assuming those are enabled within Dialogflow CX Analytics, you can see per page, per intent level analytics. So we have an out-of-the-box dashboard directly in the platform that shows you where there are the highest level of no matches, where it's the highest level of no inputs for voice, where there are drop-offs, where there are escalations. And so this lets you pinpoint specific problem areas that you want to address as you iterate on your conversational agent. So that's a great offering. And then we also see some customers using the data that's in cloud logging to build their own customized dashboards and Looker, Data Studio, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. Well, and maybe one thing, shameless plug for HumanFirst, if you are looking at, analyzing what's going on in your CX or even ES deployment, you can complement exactly what Ali talked about with, HumanFirst's prompt and data engineering capabilities that allow you to build prompts and query the conversations at scale. So, Ali mentioned some really great things around, some quantitative data points that you might capture. HumanFirst lets you start getting some more qualitative insights around the actual conversation back and forth as well. So a really nice complement to each other on that. Wonderful. That's all the questions we had today. Ali, Stephen, thank you both so much for your time, for the presentations. It was super informative. Great engagement from the audience. Thank you all so much for staying on with us, and hope you have a great rest of your week, everyone.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Bye.